Hi, everyone. I am here with Ed Chan. Glad to see him again. He just got back from his 2 month amazing vacation that he gets to do because he owns his firm, but he basically got to bike around fantastic landscapes in Europe for 2 months with his wife, with his family, got to see friends. So he's coming back refreshed to talk to us about some of the burning topics that our members have been asking about. So, yeah, very excited to dig in with you, Ed. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for
Hap-
having me, Claudia.
yes, happy to hear that. Thank you. So yeah, some of the questions that we've gathered, as always, come from queries that we have and ideas that our mentors and members have about certain topics. So I'm going to ask a few and see how you would tackle them.
Okay.
So one of the first things that we are seeing in the current landscape and everything is that that the no buy policy is one of our most important pillars that firm owners implement if they want to build a business that runs without them, right? So um, it's often you've seen that it's very difficult for firm owners to adhere to generally, especially when it comes to bypassing their senior client manager and engaging directly with team or clients. What is your advice on this?
Sure. It's firstly, it's very, very important because it's the reason why a lot of firms, including myself when I first started, was working so hard. And I started this business thinking that it would give me the life that I wanted to live, but eventually and ended up taking the life from me. And I hear that from firms constantly, and they say things like, "I don't want to grow anymore," and that's how I felt also. But what they're really saying to me is not that they don't want to grow; it's just that they associate growth with pain, and they can't take any more pain, so they don't want to grow anymore. But this is all to do with you know creating a system and a business that works. Because if the business doesn't work, then you're working really hard. But if the business is working really well, then you don't have to work. So you just said that I come back from Europe for a trip, and that's right. So the business doesn't depend on me. It just runs without me. And so the harder you're working, the less your business is working. And the less you're working, the better your business is working. So and this bypassing policy is one of the really important ingredients, things that you've got to implement in your firm. Uh, but most people find it very difficult because it is very difficult to break habits. And to be honest, some of us, we're accountants, of course, and accountants have this tendency to be very controlling over everything, and they want to be across everything, and it's very hard to let go. And if you want to grow your business, if you don't want to be a prisoner in your business, if you want the business to work so you don't have to, then you need to master the no bypass policy. And I'll give you a couple of examples, Claudia, so that we can understand what we're talking about. So often you might meet a client and the client gives you their work, and it could be, anywhere. It could be at the pub and they give you their work. Although nowadays it's mostly on the computer, but in my days, they hand this bundle of work to you, and you then go and the bypass can happen both ways. So you can bypass your senior client manager and you give the work down to his or her staff, uh, or the bypassing can occur from the staff to you and bypassing the senior client manager, or you're dealing with the client directly and you're bypassing the senior client manager. Right? So when you do that, then the person that you've asked to run this team for you, you're actually undermining their authority. So you're saying to them, I want you to run this team and take care of the clients, and then you then bypass them and deal with the clients yourself. And then eventually they're going to go, well, you tell me to deal with the clients, but then you deal with them directly. So I'll just sit back and watch you deal with them. And eventually all the work ends up on the partner's desk. And it's not because, the staff are not any good or anything like that. It's because of your own behavior. And your behavior dictates how everyone around you behaves as well. And the other bypassing that occurs, apart from bypassing the client manager to the client and deal with the client directly, so is also giving the work directly to the staff and not through the client manager. And also sometimes the staff member comes and asks you a question rather than going back to the client manager to ask the question, and then the client manager either answers it or comes to you. If he or she doesn't know the answer, comes to you for the answer. So all these situations occurs, and it's bypassing, and it's undermining the authority of your client manager, and eventually they don't know, they get so confused. They don't know, whether they're coming or going, and it creates chaos in the organization. So um, the the thing and it's really hard to break habits, right? It's really, really hard to break habits, and I get that, but you really have to work hard at not doing that, and to make sure that if a client rings you and you've spoken to the client and you've answered their questions, you've come up with a solution, you must go back to the senior client manager to keep them in the loop. Keep them informed as to what's going on, because if you don't, they won't take ownership of that client. That you've just taken the ownership of that client back onto your own hands. All right. So that's the worst thing to do. But when a staff member comes to you directly with a question, and I know what you're thinking, you're going, well, it's quicker if I just answer it, right? Rather than do all this, long way around, it's quicker if I just answer it.
Yeah.
But if you do that again, you're undermining your senior client manager's authority to manage the team, and eventually they'll just sit back and let you manage them as well. So eventually, all the work comes back onto your desk. So often, it's best to have a three-way conversation. So sometimes, whenever I go see a client, I would bring the senior client manager in with me. So there's three of us sitting in the conversation or in the Zoom. If a staff comes to me, sometimes, I'll have a three-way conversation with the client manager and the staff and myself. And it's a bit more efficient because I don't have to repeat and go back to the client manager, but it empowers the senior client manager to take ownership of both the client and the staff, the team, because they're responsible for the team. So that's why it's so important that you get on top of the no bypass policy. And look, some of us are early adopters. You get told once, and your staff is the same, and your clients are the same. You say to the clients, Jack's your client manager, and they come back to you. All right. So the early adopters, you tell them once and they go straight to your senior client manager. The middle adopters, you've got to do it 2 or 3 times. They'll keep coming back to you, but you keep directing them back to the client manager, or you bring the client manager into the room or into the conversation. And you have to do that. You only have to do that 2 or 3 times to the middle adopters. And then they're constantly dealing with the client manager. Now, the late adopters, they might need 10 to 20 times to get them to change their habits, including yourself. You've got to change habits yourself too. So you could be a middle to a late adopter, and it takes you longer to do this, but you need to do it. And I'm a bit of a middle adopter. I'm not an early adopter. I'm more of a middle adopter. So it took me a bit of difficulty as well to do this. And but the the outcome is it's incredible. Like often I get accountants saying to me, "Oh, but my client only wants to deal with me." I hear that quite a bit. But they don't. I've proven it. They don't only want to deal with you. Part of it could be your ego. So sorry to say, because people like to be liked. Okay, but if you want to scale this business, you want to grow this business. It's about getting the team to take over most of the work, if not all of the work, and then you get to do the things that you enjoy doing. but when clients say, I only want to deal with you, they're not really saying that. It's just because you haven't introduced them to anybody else. And also, they might be middle to late adopters. They take a little while to change their habits. But, you know, I find there's challenges with early adopters, middle adopters, and the different types of challenges. So with staff, if they're early adopters, they're great to work with because you tell them once and they're doing the new, that they know how to do it very, very quickly. But early adopters also change very, very easily. So they grab onto something new, and then you've taught them how to do it this way, and all of a sudden they're doing it something a different way in a few months' time because they're so quick to learn. They grab onto other things, and that's a bit frustrating because you want everything done in the same way. The middle adopters, you've got to tell them 2 or 3 times, and that might take a bit more work, right? But eventually, when their habits do change, then they're just fantastic. Now, the late adopters, they're very hard to work with initially because you've got to tell them 10 or 20 times. But the really good thing about the late adopters is once they've changed their habits, they're fantastic to work with because they always do it exactly the way you tell them. They never change. And that's so easy in the long run to work with. So as long as you understand this, then you can work with the people that you've got around you, and you can use the different techniques with them because you understand, what kind of personalities they are. I hope that made sense. Yeah.
Thank you so much for pouring your thoughts into our conversation today. This was amazing. As always, a great pleasure having you, sharing your wisdom and answering burning questions from who listens to us. And I would say to everyone to stay tuned. We're going to have even more content, even more wisdom on our episodes. So yes, thank you so much, Ed.
No, thank you for having me, and look forward to the next one.
Yes. Thank you.